Thank you, first of all, thank you for inviting me, inviting Siemens Healthineers to be here in your workshop final event. It's a pleasure, and even though we're not being involved in this project, we have, Siemens is a founder of Fondazione Politecnico of Milano, and then we have collaboration activities in other fields, not in this specific one. And I'd like to say, actually, start with a comment about Siemens. We are perceived, and we are an engineering company, very, very skilled in developing new technologies in all type of fields. It's not only the medical, the healthcare, but the energy in industry, and essentially every aspect of life where you see technology. You can say there is this big corporate. It's not the only one. There are other big corporates, but involved in developing technology. If for the medical field, nevertheless, about 20 years ago, there was a transformation in the approach that Siemens had. And it was related very much to the division that you were mentioning, the physicists or the engineers on one side, and the medical world, so the physicians, and on the other side, where the development, the technology was developed in the laboratory and then was brought to the hospital saying, this is what you need to use. And there was, at some point, there was an awareness that this approach would not work, does not work. It brings new technology into the field, but it does not optimize the technology for the needs that are actually the everyday challenges of the physicians. And so about 20 years ago, Siemens Healthcare, now with the new brand name Healthineers, but it's the same thing, same company, decided to move physicists, engineers outside of the laboratory and have it work within hospitals, and started the field where we call collaboration, active collaboration. And for example, I moved out of the laboratory, of the R&D lab, and went to the United States to work with several clinics, doing research on prototypes in the clinics and not anymore in the laboratory. And then the company has built a network, which is essentially structured in a way that in each country you have experts who are only managing innovation and research projects and collaboration. So they are not experts in all countries, but there are people who are directly linked to the headquarters, and they have a daily contact with the clinicians, with the physicians, with the clinical experts in all fields. And this is the approach. What I've seen here is essentially that the winning, the best approach possible to develop new technology is this one. There is no other way, because otherwise you have the innovation, but it's not tailored to the need, not 100% tailored to the need. So just because don't give for granted that everybody is aware of the size and what Siemens Healthineers does. There are numbers here. We'll go through. It's a figure effects, but the important thing I want to point out is, first of all, the fact that this is a global company with over 46,000 employees worldwide. And the fact that what I found it very interesting is, if you look at the revenue, this is the figure for 2016, about 7.5%, so over 1 billion euro, is reinvested into research and development. And this is then directly linked to the fact that the company has about 12,500 granted patents globally. This is the path to innovation. You need the money, definitely, and you need to ensure that you can use, that you can commercialize and have then revenue back from the technology. And this is a big effort that is constantly in place in the company. And this R&D is not spent only internally. Part of this budget is a budget which is used for clinical trials, for clinical validation in the hospitals, in the clinical side. I will go, the other numbers I'm used, will come in the presentation. I don't know. The one thing is that since we're talking about research, I wanted to show you what is the effort in manpower and resources, and in terms of the people working in the R&D, and the fact that which is very important to us and become more and more important, that at the moment, 10% of the colleagues working worldwide have clinical background. We have a medical office, a group which is it's made of physicians of every type of background and extraction, clinical extraction, and they are consultant to the let's say, technology side to develop in order to understand the clinical needs and then move the development in that direction. One of the figures that is essential again is the fact that there are always new invention disclosures, and every year are increasing. And this is not, and there are co-authors. The owners of this invention, not only Siemens employee, they are co-owned with the partners, which are university partners or clinicians. Just going back to the fact that you have probably need more clinical trials and more activities in that field. One way is to definitely search for synergies with other companies, because a clinical trial can have many endpoints or primary and secondary endpoints. And it means that maybe a device could fit into a trial where there are other outcomes that one wants to measure as well. And for example, a company like a big corporate, a company like Siemens Healthineers has such a wide portfolio covering all aspects of from the diagnostic imaging, the therapy, and different type of devices, the ultrasound, in the in vitro diagnostic laboratory, and point of care. So for the also in the emergency environment, and services that it might be. I'm not saying that it is for sure, but it might be that by exploring some of the activities that are ongoing or are in plan, there might be a fit within a specific area, also to include a collaboration with this type of development, which is not at the moment in the scope of what we are developing. But within Siemens, there is, you were mentioning that the technology always needs to be developed. There is a one step, which is the development of the next technology, which is done on-site and with the clinicians, and there are groups which are looking at the next generation. And there are things that, for example, right now I would not be aware of, because they're confidential and they're very, very protected, because they're looking at the farthest future. And so by maybe just sharing and having contact and discussion, one could find out that somewhere in the world, a big corporate like Siemens is developing something which actually could be a good match in terms of testing and synergy, and we don't know, we're not aware of. So that's also one of the important functions of having local people within a company specialized in supporting research activities, and full stop. There's no other activities, no commercial, no service, it's full group of people fully focused on searching for opportunities, which could be short-term, medium or long term. So this is also the availability that we could explore maybe for the near future. The one thing I'd like to point out, because also it's interesting related to the public funding programs that there are, in the past decades, there's been a big shift towards developing technologies, not because they are the best and the most precise and the highest standard of reliability, but they have to match, they have definitely to provide clinical outcomes which are assure that the clinical outcomes is improved, but they should also be efficient in the use. And actually, one of the parameters we are measured in innovation is the cost efficiency as well, the profitability, which doesn't mean making more money out of the healthcare system. It means that with the money you have, you're able to be sustainable on the long run as a clinic or as a hospital system. And and so the point is that the innovation is not only judged, the idea is not only judged in terms of how good, how precise the measurement is actually whether, in addition to the clinical outcome that can deliver, you are efficient, you have a smart device, something that can fit into the environment well and not producing further delays or problems in operation. And the fact that the care to the patient is actually also done in a shorter time with a lower cost. So these elements are evaluated at the moment when you have a new idea in the development phase. So there is a very technical phase, but there is also this aspect, and this is coming more and more. So we have people specialized in total cost of ownership, for example. What does it mean when I put a device there? How much does it cost really to the owner? Or to operate it, and this cost is not only the energy, I mean the electricity or the people who work with the device, but also how much does it cost to society. So it's the idea of looking at business to society. How much does it cost if I have, take a person 3 days instead, or instead of 6 days? How much, is saving also in terms of the impact on the family, on the society as well. And so there is a social aspect to the innovation that is coming more and more into play, and that we welcome because it's something because the final goal is then to improve lives by improving the health outcomes. The one thing is, of course, all fields, all areas in the care of people are touched by our technology. And what is interesting, so the prevention, the diagnosis, therapy, and the care in general, also of chronic disease. But the interesting thing is that, the data which is provided to us is that the estimate is that the hospitals usually spend 2% of the budget they have on medical technology, but the medical technology touches every patient, goes everywhere. So it means that in terms of the investment, it's actually a very big positive impact. And the other thing that in terms of innovation that we need to look at very careful in order to survive on the market as well is what are the trends that we see in the healthcare world. And I use this slide. I wanted to present it. Actually, I put in the red box the rapid scientific progress that we have, because it is indeed true that we are progressing very fast. But the innovation that we need to work on, we are asked to work on, has to take into consideration the fact that we are now seeing a healthcare providers world where there is consolidation, so not many hospitals merging together. So with different needs, specific needs related to the size also of the number of patients they're managing. And then there is a need of introducing more of the industrialized methods or the methods used in the industry in the healthcare. It doesn't mean that people becomes objects. It means that you want to have automated processes. You want to have something which is very, very easy and efficient to use. And this is a request so that we constantly have by introducing new technology. Has to fit in the idea of, for example, being fully automized if you want really to use it. And then the other thing is that, when you have discussed it also well, is that we are not focused anymore on the activities you need to do to take care of a patient. You are focused on the outcome. So there has to be a value. There has to be a solid clinical case, as Udo said, in order to introduce it, to have people adopt the innovation. So there are very wonderful, lots of wonderful innovative ideas which actually sit on the table because there is not a solid case to develop them yet. Yeah. In the previous slide, I said, you know, I was highlighting the fact that there is this rapid scientific progress. And there is one perspective I never had as a physicist, is the fact that actually physicians and clinicians are faced with so many new information, so much new information, and there's an outcome of publication which is so broad that it's impossible to keep up and to understand what is really to be implemented into the clinical workflow. And so actually I was even scared by the fact that apparently physicians suffer by the fact that we have such a rapid progress that you have in terms of the load that you need to take and the decision you need to take, what is best for your environment, what to choose, and also to find the good, I mean, the results which are really relevant. This is really a huge, I mean, there is in Medline, they say we count now 22 million references to journal articles. It's impossible to read everything which comes out every year, and so the approach that we think as a company, as a global company, we need to have is that we need to collaborate very, very closely with the physician, with the clinical world, with the hospitals, or the healthcare providers in general, because what we need to do is that we need to make sure that what we test and we develop as a clinical validation right away and can be adopted in a very short time and not staying in this clinical research area, which is essentially very useful, but we have, for example, also with our company, cases of prototypes which have been used for decades, and they're still only clinical research tools. And this is it is useful, but it's not it's not implemented in technology, the innovation into the clinical environment. So the idea. So what we do, and these are very recent data, is with our presence in essentially in all countries which have a very well-developed healthcare system, we have a lot of research collaboration, which means research projects which are run together with university, clinical centers, hospitals, and we take advantage of the fact that we have so many installed systems, such a large base of equipment that can be used. And in the break with Udo, we were discussing the fact that what Siemens keep within the company maybe some production which is does not bring much revenue because maybe it's not, you know, because of the competitors which are, you know, stronger or more better introduced in the market. Would you keep this technology even though it's not bringing you much money? It depends on the importance of the technology, and we're discussing the ultrasound case. Ultrasound is a wonderful technology in terms of physics. It's very safe. It can be used in screening, diagnosis, therapy, and follow-up of all type of, you know, essentially in every type of disease management. I mean, it's a public, you know, it's public knowledge that there are not always only uptimes with the ultrasound. We had also problems in commercializing some of the devices, but we've kept it, because ultrasound goes everywhere. It's in every department. It's everywhere, and it's such a safe technology that you need to bridge the gap in the technology and innovation. And once you've done it, as it has been done in the past few years, then you have a very strong position again in the market. So it's not. The research goes on even for the difficult times, and more in the difficult times we need to rely also what is the public funding, because we know that some achievements can be reached only in collaboration with other institutions and can be reached only by having some of the financial support that is necessary, because because it's not always, I mean, it definitely is not possible by itself, even for a big corporate, to develop everything which can be then brought into the clinical environment. And the more so with the cost pressure that we have in the present time. Okay, this is a slide I mean, I like to show, but we're not going into the details. The only thing is that to state that innovation, I think, is the basis for a company, for survival and for the flourishing of a company. Since the beginning of, the medical technology, what the Siemens has tried to do, and it's not only Siemens, I'm saying, I mean, I'm an employee of Siemens, but the point is that for a company to be to have such a long history of success is to be first, to be innovators. And I had the pleasure of being, for example, just an example, in working with the first dual source CT scanner. So, which means dual source means that there are two X-ray tubes inside. And the nice thing about it is that the idea of why would you put two sources inside? Because you want to be faster in acquiring the data for the beating heart, for example, or to use different energies from the two X-rays so that you can see different materials or different composition. The interesting thing is that a few years before the introduction, the discussion started with physicians saying, you need to be faster. You need to be faster. This pushing saying, I want to use your device in this environment, for example, in cardiac and in cardiology, but it's not good enough. And they would draw on piece of papers, their ideas, without even knowing what is inside the details of the hardware that you need inside a device. You say, but why don't you put, can you have a source coming from another direction? And maybe you can, can you use, what is the problem with the noise? Can you reduce it? So there were questions from, what I meant before, I say questions from people not involved in the technical part, and some questions were so interesting because then they open up, spaces. Say, yeah, maybe we can make some space somewhere in the gantry, and so being first, introducing a technology means actually being able to listen to what comes from the fields where you want to provide the technology, from the people who are going to use it. And the other thing which is related to nowadays needs is also to have integrated technology. And for example, also being first in putting together MRI and PET. It's very complicated from a technology viewpoint, and at this time, we are still, it's a commercial product, but it's still in the clinical validation in terms of exploring what you do with it. And we have so many research activities ongoing with university clinics only to understand what fields can be expanded, in which areas we can move that we didn't even think at the beginning when the device was developed. Okay, and the one thing that is related more to, for example, the fact that there are, that we need to navigate together when you want to collaborate with a big corporate and also work in a big corporate, you need to know whom to contact, how to handle things. And so I'm just showing some of the building blocks that are related to the innovation within the Siemens corporate world, but also the Siemens Health years. A huge, very important block is construction block, is university relation and partner management. So working together with the others. And it's very, very much connected to the open innovation. So there is not anymore the approaches that if you have an idea and it's already partially developed, it doesn't mean that it cannot fit into the portfolio of a big corporation, a big company, because there are no gates anymore saying everything which has been invented inside is going to become a product for us and the rest is not of interest. Actually, there is a very important flow between universities, research center, and the open innovation activities. So, and it's always worthwhile exploring. So I don't know if the BabyLux is ready for market, in 1 year or 2 years, but in it might be worth having discussion with big companies like Siemens and the others, because we all have this very, very important link between what has been developed outside and what can become a product, a future product for us. And of course, everyone, we are now aware that intellectual property rights is essential. It is an essential point. I showed you the granted patents. I showed the fact that there are every year there are invention filed. It is important to protecting the rights for everyone, and this is also included in the program of public funding, because the resource exploitation has to bring a benefit, something back. Otherwise, there will not be more innovation coming out of that. So this is and that's the reason I put it on the three on the same level together, because also in the dialogue with the partners, this aspect has to be taken into account very from the beginning or of the dialogue, very in very detail. Okay, the rest is, it's a standard. Of course, there are technical standards which needs to be, and regulation needs to be addressed, and this is a fundamental block. It comes afterwards, after having the solid case and the good idea and the development, but also there is a constant dialogue and a need to address all points that need to be solved in terms of safety and reliability and use of a device. Just to finish up, it's the final slide is what we call the flavors of our collaboration. If you, when you're exploring in our, I mean, we try to, I mean, it's a schematic division. It doesn't mean that really there is no overlap, but the point is that there are types of collaboration that falls in different fields, and definitely we have the development side, and that would be hardware, software, post-processing, merging information from different modalities, from different acquisition systems, or thinking about new methods. But then there is all this is a huge topic, a huge activity for us, is the clinical application, the feedback on the early prototypes, how we pass from a prototype which is an early phase to a mature prototype which is almost ready to be included into the product development. And also, how does a new technology change the workflow in the clinical hospital? This has become a fundamental topic. And so we're collaborating and working on that. And this is also part of the collaboration that we have with university, and also in funded programs. It's not only the development of the device itself, but the societal impact or the change that can have. And of course, I mean, there are topics, this is one thing, for example, the healthcare technology assessment, which will become important for all devices. Nowadays, we introduce devices which are CE-labeled, FDA marked. They have been validated in terms of reliability, solidity of the technical part, but whether it's really, they're not assessed in terms of the effect in health, in the care, in the everyday care. Is it technology that should be adopted or not? And also that is part of the evaluation for new project and new innovation at the moment, because we know that in Italy, I think every region has to evaluate the technologies that can be reimbursed, for example, because they've been assessed. So an innovation which is published somewhere and has a prototype, it might never become a product if it doesn't go through this step. This is also an area of collaboration and of, let's say, research or clinical validation. And the training and education that is necessary for every new device is actually necessary for every device, every now and then, and for all the improvements that we do. And so also that's part of the effort that we do in terms of evaluating innovation, also how much it takes to learn, whether it's a quick learn or you need a very long curve at the beginning. as you can see, it's a very broad arena, and trying to, going back to the project, to your, that you have been working on the past 3 years, there are spaces where maybe that one can explore and see whether you can find synergies within a company like Siemens or with other also big corporate, but I mean, there are certain things that definitely can be done by looking, as you also mentioned, at the private funding and see what kind of synergies can be found. And that's all from my side, and thank you for the attention.